to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, August 28th, 2015. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And, of course, tomorrow's my birthday. I'm years old, and Claire's planning a surprise for me, which, if it's not pornographic, I'll tell you all about on Monday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. By the way, I actually share the same birthday as Michael Jackson, the rock star. And I think that kind of kills the whole idea of astrology, because I can't dance, and I'm not into little boys. But just something to think about there. Okay, getting on to the more serious news. The corporate media and the gun grabbers are still trying to exploit that terrible shooting of the two news people in Virginia. And they're blaming everybody except, well, the shooter himself and his mental state and whatever medications he may or may not have been on, and they are not admitting to that. That's got to be concealed. You can't possibly know that. And there's a big debate over there about whether or not it's a hate crime. And apparently, a lot of people are noticing that when it's a white perpetrator and a black person or Mexican person, it's a hate crime. But when it's a black person killing white people, it isn't a hate crime. Frankly, I think it's kind of a ridiculous thing to have an idea of a hate crime, because we're talking about murder. And yeah, obviously when you commit murder, you hate the person. But they're trying to sort of codify that, hatred of one individual is sort of okay and more acceptable than just hating an entire class of people. And it's political correctness run amok here. And apparently over at Fox News, they're throwing their hands about and screaming about, why isn't this a hate crime? And, of course, for people in the corporate media, it's two of their own, actually three of their own. And that's another reason they're putting a lot of attention on it. Now, the fact that so many of these acts of violence seem to be linked in with prescription antidepressants, psychiatric medications, is starting to spread. The awareness is growing. Over at Reality Check in Truth in Media, they're asking, why aren't these shootings sparking a debate over antidepressants? Well, the reason is obvious. The pharmaceutical corporations are making much more money than the gun makers. They can afford much better lobbyists. And Congress actually did hold hearings on the link between prescription antidepressants and acts of violence. They know it's a problem, but they didn't want to do anything about it because it might harm the profits of the big pharmaceutical industries. Following the Sandy Hook incident in Connecticut, the lawyer for their medical examiner opposed releasing what medications Adam Lanza was on. Didn't work, we found out anyway. On the argument that it might discourage people from taking the medications they should be taking. It's arguable whether they should be taking them. Remember, the guy who invented the term attention deficit hyperactivity disorder admitted before he died it was a made-up fictitious condition with which to sell pills to kids who really didn't need it. When I was a kid in school, we didn't have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We had teacher is boring the crud out of me. That's really what it is. The educational curriculum and the teacher could not hold the attention of the bright students, so let's dope up the bright students and bring them down to the same mental capacity as the stupid students. That's the solution, because it's politically correct. But people are starting to ask about this stuff, and it is important to understand. And the problem with prescription antidepressants isn't just the acts of violence. Those are the ones that attract media attention. But by definition, these drugs change behavior. And we're going to have a comment about that a little further in. But I did do an analysis and noticed that when you plot the saturation of these medications into the American public and you put that against a graph of the increase in domestic violence, they line up. So it's not just mass shootings and spectacular suicides that are caused by these medications. The side effects are not confined to acts of violence. There may be other bizarre behavior. that's linked to this. And no, our nation may have drugged itself to the edge of insanity. And a lot of behavior that we view as aberrant, like completely crazy, like all the child molestation going on, what if that is being triggered by these medicines? But we can't offend the money. We can't offend the big pharmaceutical corporations because they write very, very generous campaign donation checks, and they're very, very generous with their advertising dollars. So we can't upset them at all. Now, turning over to the war zones, Poroshenko's forces are in open defiance of the Minsk agreement. They have resumed their all-out war against the Donbass region. And OSCE is already saying that all of the heavy artillery that was supposed to be in these sanctioned, controlled storage areas, it's gone. It's disappearing. It's being put back into play over there. The Donetsk militia is saying that the Kiev forces have violated the ceasefire 37 times over the past 24 hours. And at this point, let's not talk about the Minsk agreements or the ceasefire. They don't exist anymore. They've been run through the shredder. And notice how the American corporate media isn't talking about any of this. And yes, there's some other newsworthy things going on out there. I mean, we've got Hurricane Erica that everybody's looking at, and we've got, Hillary's thrashing around and Donald Trump's ascendancy. But we're looking at the start of all-out war in Europe. And you'd think somebody in the corporate American media would be noticing, but so far, no go on that one. Now, Germany is ruling out deploying international peacekeepers in Donbass. They're basically saying, yeah, we want Poroshenko to go slap those eastern Ukrainians around, and so we're not going to send in peacekeepers. Just let them go for it here. Now, there's been a new development coming out of the international investigation into the shoot-down of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. As you know, the Western media has been pounding this drum of it's Russia, 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 Russian book, Putin with a shotgun, whatever. All Russia's fault was all Russia's fault since day one. And they have been repeatedly caught rewriting statements coming out of the investigation to serve that political agenda. And it's forced the investigation to repeatedly come out with clarifications, saying, we said it could be a Buk missile. We don't know. And even if it is, we can't say it's Russian or Kiev. And more recently, they were forced to come out with another clarification saying we also can't rule out an air-to-air missile. Now, the international investigation has announced they're going to be publishing their report October 13th. Little less than 2 months from now. And it has also come out that the international investigation has been speaking with the pilot, Vladislav Voloshin, who was reported by another party as having come back from some kind of mission over Ukraine in a state of shock, with empty rails on his aircraft and talking about how the plane had been in the wrong place. And apparently the international investigators have been talking to him. I still think the most likely explanation for what's going on is that Vladimir Putin's presidential jet was in the same airspace at the same time. He was coming back from these meetings in South America, and I think Kiev wanted to assassinate Putin to throw Russia's leadership into turmoil in order to simply complete the reconquest of the eastern Ukrainian republics. And President Putin's presidential jet is built into a civilian airliner, and it's painted in the same colors as Malaysian Airlines. From a distance, it's very easy to confuse the two aircraft. And I think this Vladislav Voloshin was sent up to shoot down Putin's presidential plane, and he got the wrong one. So we'll see what's going to develop on that one. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call here. David in Alaska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
It's Arkansas, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Arkansas. I misread the little thing here.
It's okay. Sometimes in the summertime, I kind of wish I was in Alaska.
Well, there isn't even an AK in the list here. Arkansas is supposed to be AR. Okay. Technical glitch. Technical glitch. Good. Yes.
Hey, somebody fed the Mogwai after midnight again. We really got to kind of talk to them about that. I just wanted to wish you happy birthday. Hey, I'm the first one to do that today, so yay. We certainly appreciate what you're doing out there, kind of being a watchdog over all this stuff. Because our media is supposed to be the watchdog over this kind of stuff that keeps this kind of stuff from happening. I think they're culpable.
They're supposed to be, but they aren't anymore. They've been bought up by corporations, and their job is to sell the corporate agenda, which under fascism also includes the government agenda as well. And that's what's given rise to the independent media as a whole. And they don't know what to do about it. There are thousands of blogs and websites like WhatReallyHappened.com. And they're all out there with the facts and figures, and the audience is switching over to us. The total viewership numbers for the corporate media are in major decline. They're still somehow able to pay their professional liars like Brian Williams millions of dollars a year, and it's still not drawing people back. I mean, maybe that's the advertisement. We pay him $8 million a year. You should listen to him. Well, we don't listen to him because you're paying him $8 million a year, because we know he's paid to lie. And be very, very convincing at it.
Oh, absolutely. It's all the ad revenues from the pharmaceutical companies and all these other people that are poisoning us and that are, funding all this stuff. You're talking about, just how much damage is being caused by that. You've inspired a lot of people. All those Rivero's Rangers are out there talking to a lot of people, waking people up, and it's really been making a huge difference, Michael. You're definitely one of the good guys. You do everything you can in your little corner of the world to make the world a better place, and we certainly appreciate it. Just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. That's all I got. Stay safe, stay free. We'll let you go.
Thank you very much for the happy birthday wishes, and, the party starts as soon as the radio show is over, because on the other side of that international date line, it's already my birthday. So we're going to stretch that out just as long as we can. Thank you very much for the phone call, David. We're going to let you go here. And going on back to the news in Ukraine, we need to remember there's a huge amount of outright fakery going on. Remember, truth is the first casualty of war. And there's an article over at Russia Today talking about the Forbes report that claimed that Russian regular army soldiers were being killed in Ukraine, which is not true. And they did a little digging, and they found out that Forbes had relied on a single source, a supposed Russian website that turned out to be an absolute complete fake, and basically pointed out that there were grammatical errors in the original Russian on the website, meaning they weren't real Russians. And so, there's a huge amount of lying going on. That's how they sell the wars to you. No ruler in history is ever able to step up to his people and say, I just decided we should invade this country over here. They got a bunch of stuff that I think it'd be cool to own. And some of you are going to die, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make. And let's march on off. And it doesn't work. They got to come up with some kind of a whopper. They're attacking us. They're invading us. They attacked the radio station at Gleiwitz. They knocked down the World Trade Towers. They hate you. They're coming to bring the Death Star and everything else. Fortunately, the human race has, in the last 2 decades, developed a huge and very healthy skepticism about anything coming out of the government and the corporate media. That's why they're thrashing around. When General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this plan to conquer all the resource-rich areas of the world, to shackle them to the U.S. dollar, the original plan was supposed to be over and done with in 2008, was supposed to be accomplished. We're like 7 years past that deadline. And they're having to go back into Iraq for a third time. They're having to go back into Yemen for a second time, Libya for a second time. They're in serious trouble carrying this forward. And nobody is buying the cover story anymore about we're bringing democracy and humanitarian intervention and all this other good stuff, because we've seen it so many times since the end of World War II. The U.S. is always invading somebody's country. We're always going to bring them democracy, and what they actually get is a dictatorship. Iran under the Shah, Chile under Pinochet, Cuba under Batista, and on and on and on. Now, another hoax that continues to perpetuate itself is the claim that Iran is going to do its own inspections at Parchin. An Associated Press originally put this story out. They got burned with a forged document And it was as bad a forgery as the one that they tried to use to claim that Iraq was buying yellow cake processed uranium from Niger. We have a paper. It must be so. And it was nonsense from the start because Iraq has plenty of natural uranium within their own borders. They don't need to buy yellow cake from anybody. So it's another forgery. And AP is out there, oh, this will help us sell the war against Iran and kill the Iran deal, so of course we're going to go with it. And AP got embarrassed again. At which point they start, flooding the independent media with chemtrails and HAARP and fake Apollo landings and flat Earth, trying to cling to what little credibility they have left by attacking ours with all this planted nonsense. But even though the claim that Iran is doing their own inspections at Parchin has been completely discredited, the opponents of the Iran deal and the media are still continuing to put this out as if it were true. Do you remember back when it was claimed that Ahmadinejad had said that Iran was going to wipe Israel off of the map? Oh, how terrible of Ahmadinejad! And it was everywhere. And people who actually spoke the language were looking at Ahmadinejad's original speech and saying, that's not what he said. It was an intentionally skewed translation provided by the Middle East Media, it's MEMRI, M-E-M-R-I, Middle East Media Reporting Institute, or whatever the acronym stands for. But it's a known Israeli propaganda front. And they will provide free translations of Arabic media to the Western press, and the translations are always skewed to make the Arabs look bad. This was another classic case. Even Israel is now admitting Ahmadinejad never said that. And yet the American corporate media kept pounding and pounding and pounding that claim over and over and over again. And they're doing the same thing with this claim that Iran is doing their own inspections at Parchin. It's already been discredited. But it serves the political agenda, and we will shove it at the people, and they will eat their daily ration of U.S. government bovine excrement, because that's what they're supposed to be doing. There's the music. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and getting on back, finishing up on the topic of the Iran nuclear deal. Apparently, almost 1,000 U.S. rabbis have signed a letter to Congress urging them to reject the nuclear deal, reject the possibility of peace leading to a war. And my answer to that is we should take every one of those rabbis, and in fact anybody else who wants this war with Iran, give them rifles and parachutes and drop them over Tehran. And the rest of us, we're going to stay home and watch the show from a distance. We're going to grab another phone call. Maryland in New Mexico. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Ulterior, turn the media icon. Happy birthday to you.
That's a good impression. That is a very good impression. Thank you very much for that. And that was, you have to be my age to appreciate that. Okay, but that was wonderful. All righty, getting on here. It has now been 1 year since Israel finished their attack on Gaza that was based on this completely fabricated idea that Gaza was somehow responsible for 3 Israeli teenagers who were kidnapped and killed over in the West Bank. Kind of like when Dick Cheney went hunting for a bird in a cage and then spun and shot his own friend. It's like that. West Bank kidnapping, we'll bomb Gaza. And Israel celebrated yesterday by carrying out more airstrikes on Gaza, claiming that a rocket had been fired from Palestine and hit absolutely nothing. It's a repeating pattern. You would think that anybody firing a rocket at Israel, knowing the reaction it's going to provoke, is going to aim it at something really important. But isn't it weird how all the rockets coming out of Gaza and all the rockets coming out of Syria, they always seem to be aimed at empty stretches of desert, and all they blow up is dust. Kind of makes you suspicious of just who is launching those rockets. And don't forget, the last time Israel went into Lebanon, the Lebanese army found some rockets on racks aimed back into Israel on their side of the border, running on timers. Of course Israel is doing it. That's their modus operandi. Oh, they're attacking us, we can go to war. So there's an article over at Desert Peace, which is basically a collection of photos looking back on the horrendous damage and destruction brought by Israel down on the Gazan people, including all those killed and crippled children. Now, there's been an interesting little development. Not too long ago, there was a legal case over in Great Britain where you need to understand how their TV system works. The BBC is operated by the government to provide entertainment and news to the British people, and they do produce some very nice TV shows. I like a lot of their stuff a lot better than what's coming out of American TV these days. But in order to get all of that, you have to pay a television tax, a license fee. And there's a gentleman named Tony Rook who refused to pay the license fee because of his allegation that the BBC was part of the cover-up for 9/11. Now, not paying your TV license fee, there's more involved there than just your cable gets pulled. You can go to jail for that. And so he was taken to court, and he said, the case is, okay, why should I pay a TV license fee to a government broadcaster that intentionally misrepresented the facts about the 9/11 attacks? And as his point, he pointed to where the BBC reported on the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 more than 20 minutes before it actually happened. We have the clips of the BBC's reporter in New York announcing the collapse of the building, and it's still standing right behind her. You can see it. Was never hit by an airplane, collapsed right into its own footprint. And BBC's never been able to explain how they just psychically knew the building was going to collapse. And by the way, they weren't alone. Fox and CNN also made the same report. They were going off a timeline. Somebody missed a cue to push the button on the demolition charges in building number 7. So anyway, Tony Rook went to court, and he said, why should we pay a license fee to a broadcaster who is lying to us, which is a very good statement, and he won his lawsuit in court. The British court agreed that there is a problem with the fact that BBC reported on the collapse of Building 7 more than 20 minutes before it happened. You're not going to see this in the American corporate media. So good for Tony Rook for standing up here. And we all know it's all fraud and fakery. Now, there's a new article over at Cryptagon, and it's a very long video presentation. You might want to bookmark it and save it for later. But yesterday, if you'll remember, we reported on how new digital technology had proven that a bullet fragment supposedly on the X-ray of the head of John F. Kennedy that was used to convict Lee Harvey Oswald of being the crazed lone nut assassin, so don't go looking at the CIA or the Federal Reserve or any of those other possible people with motives to actually kill Kennedy. It was all this guy in the bookstore. And that image of a bullet fragment is a fake. It was added later. The X-ray was rephotographed and altered to produce the X-ray that was then given to the Warren Commission and presented to you as ironclad proof that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in the killing of John F. Kennedy. Well, now there's a new documentary out called The Zapruder Film Mystery, which demonstrates how the version of the Zapruder film that is in the National Archives has been altered and faked as well. And we know that was going on all the way back even in Jim Garrison's case. They pointed out how when the magazines were publishing frames from the Zapruder film, they intentionally reversed the order to sell the idea that Kennedy had been shot from the rear. Because, as you know, the actual Zapruder film shows that Kennedy's shot from the front. Just lie after lie after lie, and they paid these scientists all kinds of money to try and demonstrate how when you're shot from behind, it's somehow going to make your head fly backward. There's going to be a jet, or it's going to carry them, and they did all this stuff. And even Walter Cronkite, the most trusted name in television, signed on to this, trying to convince all of America, oh yes, it was a lone nut. Don't go looking at the CIA or organized crime or Israel that was very angry with Kennedy for refusing to let them have nuclear weapons, or the Texas oil billionaires who were losing all that money from the oil depletion allowance, or the Federal Reserve, which was absolutely appalled by Executive Order 11110. Trust us, it's just this little kook, and no, he didn't work for the CIA. Honest, trust us, we wouldn't lie to you about something like that. How many times do you have to be lied to by this government before you understand that's what they do all the time to get your money, your obedience, and the lives of your children for wars of conquest? I'm sure their expectation is every time you're lied to, you'll turn around and say, "Thank you, sir, may I have another," like some sort of a plebe in a military academy. But we're not in a military academy. We want the truth. And I will have a truthful government, or I will have no government at all. Because when you live under a government that lies to you all the time, you don't really know what's going on. You can't even have a contract with somebody who lies to you. The essence of contract law is you can't agree to be lied to. It's unenforceable. You can't know what you're agreeing to. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call. Rob in Florida. Aloha, Rob. Get your head down. Erica's on its way to get you. And what's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. I just wanted to ask you if you had seen anything on the news about the current Iraqi government deciding to open up the green zone to normal Iraqi citizens for the first time in years. This after weeks and weeks of protest against corruption in the government.
Well, I have to be very honest. I haven't been paying that much attention to Iraq with all the stuff that's going on in other areas, but that does seem rather interesting. I'm getting a sense that a lot of these countries that the U.S. counts in their sphere of influence are getting ready to sort of move the other way. We're seeing that in Egypt. I mean, the U.S., after Mubarak was kicked out and Morsi was put in, they went in and kicked out Morsi and put a new puppet in, but all of a sudden the new government of Egypt is all buddy-buddy with Russia. They're doing economic and weapons deals. They're talking about a coalition on the side of Assad against what everybody knows is the U.S. proxy ISIS. We may see the same thing in Baghdad. I mean, I think the reason the U.S. planted ISIS in Iraq in order to go back in there militarily is the people of Iraq want the U.S. puppet out, and it's been adversarial. And I think maybe the government in Baghdad is sending out a message, hey, we're cutting ties with Washington, D.C., we're not afraid of you anymore, we're going to open up the green zone, let's go back to being our own country. And I think we're about to lose Iraq in the political sense. That's my read. I need to take a more careful look at it, but that's my first read of the situation, is we're seeing all these puppet rulers decide they're not going to be puppets any longer. Because the ones that stay puppets, look at all the things they're dealing with. They got kicked out in Yemen, got kicked out in Libya, and I think all these puppets are realizing the U.S. can't guarantee their continuance and ascendancy. Look at how much trouble Poroshenko is having. And I think a lot of these U.S. puppets, especially in Egypt, are starting to say, you know something, thank you very much for putting me into power, but I'm actually going to go back to being the head of my own country.
I certainly agree with that. I think it's a very big step in Iraq, especially since I've listened to you for many years, and you've always mentioned that we might have a helicopter moment in Baghdad, just like we have in Vietnam, and we're that much closer because of this decision by the Iraqi government. And thank you for your time. Wonderful show. All
right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. All right. Let's look at the economy. As you're probably already aware, there was a valiant effort by the plunge protection team to give us our traditional Friday stock market massage and the happy ending, and they didn't quite make it. The Dow ended 11 in the red, which is not enough to get upset about, except that it's another reminder they're losing control over the market. Their ability to manipulate it is breaking down. The NASDAQ ended 15 in the green, S&P 1 in the green. A lot of noise, a lot of volatility. And apparently, at some point in the day, Charles Schwab was hit by outages during the busy trading stretch. It was a glitch. The system began to break down. Now, over at HSBC, their payment system supposedly collapsed. Another mysterious computer glitch, and 275,000 workers did not get paid. Because the way the system works is you don't get a paper paycheck, it's direct bank deposit. And these 275,000 workers are going into the holiday, and their pay from the last week is not in their personal accounts. And I'm sure it's just a computer glitch, and it's not because the bank has actually run out of liquidity. Of course, we would never suspect anything like that. Now, Paul Craig Roberts has come out with an article, Where is Neo When We Need Him?, which tells us he's a big fan of the Matrix, as we all are. And he's basically talking about how the Western media is trying to convince everybody that this stock market turmoil is all the fault of China. Bad China, bad China. Everything's the fault of Russia and China. We didn't do anything wrong. And Paul Craig Roberts in this article goes down all the things that have gone wrong, that were caused by U.S. government and Wall Street fraud, corruption, malfeasance, incompetence. And they've all decided, well, we're just going to blame China for that. But it is simply not true. In fact, something to consider. China's economy, the strength of their economy, was based very much on exports of manufactured goods. One of their biggest customers, if not their biggest customer, was the United States. Now, as the U.S. economy was driven into a kamikaze dive by the money junkies over at the Federal Reserve, Americans can no longer afford to buy products, including Chinese imports. We're not buying anything to stores. Look at the retail numbers. And of course, China felt the impact of that drop in export revenues. So China is actually one of the victims of Wall Street and the private central banks, right alongside you and I and ordinary Americans. But they're being made the scapegoat by this financial and political class that is incapable of accepting responsibility for anything they do wrong. That's what's going on here. Ron Paul came out with an article saying that, yes, the Federal Reserve and Congress bear 99% of the responsibility for having created a stock market bubble that is about to explode. Because when you are manipulating stock market prices to make the market look good, so you can use it as a political banner that, see, the economy is great, look at that soaring Dow and everything, and if you're hungry and homeless and jobless, it must be your own fault. You know, you deserve to be poor and hungry. Look at that Dow. But inevitably, because you're driving up the prices with market manipulation and the value of the stocks is not going up with it, it is by any definition a bubble. And it's a huge one. And all bubbles explode sooner or later. And we're starting to see the pinpricks in this one. Now, the U.S. is not alone in all of this. Article coming out of the soccer. Europe is in free fall. And they're basically saying that the European Union's problem is many of the individual member states are having problems. Their union means the problems are there's a contagion sweeping across the entire union. They're looking at all the different individual hotspots. Greece, obviously, a major problem. Italy, a major problem. Low productivity growth, high debt, labor costs. Spain is in trouble. France is in trouble. Germany is about drained out. Now, over in Germany, ordinary business people are saying it's time to end the Russian sanctions. Remember, there were 6,000 companies in Germany doing business with Russia before all of this Kiev and Stinkface and Putin's a bad guy and all this other nonsense. And when the sanctions went in, these 6,000 German companies suffered harm. Quite a few of them have already gone out of business. Business leaders are saying it's time to let this sanctions nonsense go away. We shouldn't be a part of the contest between Obama and Putin. We just want to go back to peace through commerce. Unfortunately, Merkel's government is saying absolutely not. We are going to keep the sanctions there until we get the war we all richly deserve. And Merkel is basically throwing her own businesses, her own earning ability into the fire to serve this agenda of starting a whole new world war in Europe. And they're running into even more and more trouble. Over in Great Britain, Jeremy Corbyn who is leading in the polls right now, is saying that Great Britain would be much better off politically and financially if they quit NATO and became friends with Russia. And he's absolutely right. Russia's the happening place. That's why so many people are making deals with them. While the U.S. has spent the last 20 years making wars, Russia's been making products, good ones. I saw a video of one of their latest warplanes on display at the air show. Makes the F-35 look like a pregnant cow waddling over to the slaughterhouse. It's amazing. Now, as we reported earlier in the week, China is dumping treasury bonds. They're saying ostensibly they're doing it because they need other cash to get their economy going again. But a lot of people are saying this is an escalation of the currency war, and it's going to force the Federal Reserve to go into hyperinflation of the U.S. dollar. Got to take a break for the top of the hour news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show for hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is still in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We're talking about the economy, and there is a great deal of gold trading going on right now. J.P. Morgan is basically issuing new gold, certificates, and Goldman Sachs acquired 54,100 ounces of gold for the house account. Now, we don't know if this is physical or paper. One thing we do know is that gold prices rose today, and apparently some delivery contracts had to be settled. But we're going to see them continue to try and hammer physical metal prices down because they're absolutely terrified. If there's another continuation of this drop, people are going to start liquidating their portfolios, emptying their savings accounts, and they're going to go into metals because you forget the daily, weekly ups and downs. If you look at gold's performance over the past decade, it's doing way better than the equities markets. Remember earlier in the week we actually had it on the SRN news break where they're saying, you 401k holders, don't panic, don't liquidate your stocks, just ride it out, all will be well. Well, it's going to be well for them if you don't liquidate your stocks. They're not looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves. Same thing with CNN saying there's not going to be a crash. Well, there may not be a crash. It may be a controlled, steady decline, but the market trend is definitely down. And there is a stock market bubble. It's global. And the American stock market is more heavily overvalued than it was back in 1929. Meanwhile, a little reminder, after all the fraud that's come out, LIBOR rigging, gold and silver rigging, all of this stuff, Eric Holder, Attorney General Eric Holder, has not sent a single banker to jail over the mortgage-backed security fraud or any of it. In this country, bankers have become a protected class of nobility. It doesn't matter what they do, they are immune from prosecution. Quite a difference to Iceland, which jailed their crooked bankers after the 2008 meltdown. China's arresting crooked traders and bankers. Iran is sentencing them to death. Now, Financial Times has once again reiterated that it's time to get rid of cash. You really don't need cash. It's just an archaic relic of another age. All of your wealth has to be in the computers of the banking system. That'll make everything so much better. Well, it does make it better for the banks because if there's no cash, you can't withdraw it. There can't be a run on the bank. And they can just shift it from bank to bank to keep the bookkeeping looking good. But have you noticed this steady evolution since the country began, where Americans have lost control over their own money? When the country was started, the dollar was a weight measure of silver. That's what was in the silver dollar. The paper notes were claim checks. The paper notes were not the money. The money was the silver and gold coinage. Then they started taking the silver out. And they started treating the paper notes as the money, a unit of debt, borrowed at interest from the central bank. Now, even after the damage caused by that scam, the next step is for you not to even be able not to even be able to control your own money, put it in your own pocket. And they're afraid of bank runs, and that's why they're still out there calling for abolishing cash. I don't think it's going to succeed because what would politicians put in the G-strings of the strippers if they ban cash? And yes, it's just a joke, and yes, the strip clubs can sell paper ticket tokens off of your little plastic card and everything, but you get the idea. There's too much of our culture that is cash-based. The CIA would not be able to do their drug trade without a cash base that's anonymous. Organized crime, and they've got a lot of influence in Washington, D.C. Let's be very honest. Now then, 42,000 Volkswagen vehicles have been recalled due to an issue with the airbags. 73,000 Chevy Cobalts recalled. Can't even make decent cars anymore here. Petco has filed for an initial public offering. Now, getting on to politics, Donald Trump apparently got irked by all the people making fun of his hair. You know, the hell toupee jokes and so forth. So he basically, on one of his speeches, he called up this lady from the audience and said, go ahead and tug on it. It's my real hair. And they're making a big deal out of this. And my view is, who cares? Who cares if he's wearing a toupee? Who cares if he's bald? The presidency isn't supposed to be a beauty contest. If it was, we would have President Sarah Palin, and then we'd really be in a tough place. We're supposed to pick presidents who know how to do the job, not just somebody who looks good in a suit. Now, getting on back to Trump's issue with immigration, the current statistics are an anchor baby is born in this country every 93 seconds. Should they be citizens? No, of course not. Okay, pardon me, I'm having to deal with a bit of a crisis here. Okay. Now, we posted a link to an article which points out one of the reasons the immigration problem has gotten so completely out of control is the care and feeding of the illegal immigrants has become its own complex. It's already a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's huge corporate profits. And just like the corporate prisons are treating prisoners as inventory and staff and workers, this immigration complex is treating the illegal immigrants like products. We will store and we will care for and we will get tax dollars to do it. And they've made so much money, they now have their own lobbyists, and aren't they saying, oh, we've got to lobby for more illegal immigration because we get more money from the government for that. Now, over in the political arena, Hillary Clinton is taking a new tactic. She's basically trying to categorize Joe Biden's talk of entering the presidency as divisive, the same kind of language we're seeing from the GOP, from Trump stepping in. Oh, you're just going to split the vote. You're splitting the party. How dare you split the party and not go with the candidate we want to go with? And so Hillary Clinton's team is getting very alarmed by all the talk of Joe Biden throwing his hat into the ring, and they're trying to find some way to just kill it before it goes any further. Or failing that, who knows? They might take a shot at Joe himself. Do a Robert Kennedy on him. We might see candidates dropping like flies before this whole mess is over. So Hillary Clinton is out there calling for party unity, meaning you should all back me because I'm me and I'm the chosen one of the Democratic Party. Well, not really. She's polling behind Joe Biden. And apparently Fox News is saying Hillary is personally calling all of Joe Biden's supporters, trying to get them to drop support for Joe Biden. That's fear in the air. Now, a couple of days ago, Hillary Clinton made this bizarre comment equating Republicans and conservatives to terror groups regarding their treatment of women, and you're trying to keep women down, and you're trying to take away our right to abortion, and you're trying to take away everything. And that was, for a lot of people, even within the Democrats, Hillary's jumping the shark moment. And Hillary's being asked to apologize, not just by Republican leaders, but even people within the Democratic Party. It was an out-of-line remark. And the fact that she's making these kind of extreme statements right now tells us she knows she's in serious trouble. She's in very serious trouble. All right, we're coming up on a commercial break. I got to deal with something that's happening downstairs, and we'll be back in 4 minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And if you're wondering what all the little background confusion is going on, it's very simple. Our TV set developed some problems. Thankfully, we had the extended warranty. Geek Squad is here fixing it now. They actually showed up earlier than we were expecting, and so I'm having to deal with that and getting everything hooked up. So pardon my seeming confused. It's not because I'm getting older. It's because I've got too many things drawing my attention. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton, there's a big news story. It's starting to make the rounds, and this is actually an old story. This has actually been known for a very, very long time, all the way back to the 1990s. And it has to do with the fact that Chelsea Clinton is not Bill Clinton's daughter. And we've actually known it all along. But at WhatReallyHappened.com, we have a general policy that we don't go after the kids for the sins of the parents. But Chelsea is now an adult. She's a public figure herself. And when we talk about the character of Hillary Clinton, it's important to understand, Bill wasn't the only one grabbing some on the side. And Hillary was rumored to be having affairs not only with Webb Hubbell, whom Chelsea Clinton bears a great similarity to, but also with, fellow Rose law firm partner and later suicided White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. And so we need to walk a fine line here. I mean, it's not Chelsea's fault where her genes come from. But it does reveal a behavior about Hillary Clinton that has to be taken into consideration when we're considering whether or not we should let this person near the White House. And, of course, Hillary Clinton is absolutely the last person I want to see in the White House. If it came down to an election between Hillary Clinton and the Loch Ness Monster, they're going to have to put a really big swimming pool in at the White House. Now, getting on back to more domestic affairs, there's an economic reality we need to look at. 72% of black children are born to single-mother households, but for some reason, liberals think the Confederate flag is the problem, and if we ban that, everything else is going to be better for the black people. No, it isn't. They're basically engaging in the manipulation of symbols because they can't actually change the reality. And as George Carlin used to say, I leave symbols to the symbol-minded. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the worlds of science and high-tech and the rest of it. As you know, people in Florida are getting very nervous because of Hurricane Erica. They've had, up until now, a very quiet hurricane season over in the Atlantic. But Erica is a very big storm. It's already caused 4 deaths. And all of the forecasted tracks for it have it basically transiting Florida right up the long axis, right across all those amusement parks and everything that are right there in the middle. And it is building in strength. So a lot of people are very concerned, getting prepared. We have our own problem out here with Hurricane Ignacio, which is going to be coming up on the Big Island late Sunday and should be closest here to Oahu early Wednesday. And so if we could also be without power because that, too, is spinning up to be a monster storm. The one behind it, Hurricane Yamina, the current forecast track is for well north of the Hawaiian Islands, so it doesn't look like that's going to be a problem. And, again, the forecast tracks are not that accurate past 48 hours. They're even now posting disclaimers. Don't rely on this more than 24, 48 hours ahead. And always remember that for the really large storms, the potential for damage is larger than the predicted cone of possible paths. But we are well within the cone of possible paths for Ignacio. And this is our 8th tropical cyclone this hurricane season. And that's unusually high. And sooner or later, we're going to run out of luck. Now, over at Ashley Madison, their CEO has decided to quit. The lawsuits are piling up. The negative press is piling up. The awareness that the entire Ashley Madison website was a complete fraud that was taking money from all these horny married guys to set them up with this idea that they might find a woman who wanted to have an affair with them and have a cheating relationship with them. And so apparently Noel Biederman is stepping down. And, well, he should. He was running this total scam. The vast majority of the female profiles at the Ashley Madison website were fakes. In fact, something to keep in mind. You know, you ladies who have found out your significant others were signed up on this website, I would not be surprised to find out there never were any actual affairs that took place, because it was a hoax. Ashley Madison was selling a fantasy. You know, give us so much money per month and we'll set you up with the fantasy that you could have an affair. And there was even a little disclaimer at the bottom of the website. This is provided for entertainment purposes. It was a fraud. It was a complete scam. So, now then, speaking of scams, there's a new password recovery scam that's hitting users of Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo Mail, in which the scammers are sending out these complex emails that appear to you to be some kind of a notification from your email provider that you need to log in and reset your password. And in the process of it, your email account security is compromised. They get copies of all your emails. They're looking for credit card numbers, so forth and so on. And, of course, not a word from the mighty National Security Agency about who these criminals are or whether they might be stopped or not. Now, a lot of people are very concerned about all of this intrusive software that's coming in with Windows 10, and more alarmed that Microsoft is now sending out patches to Windows 7 and Windows 8 that are back propagating this added intrusive spyware on all these computers. And what's happening now is people are figuring out the specific updates that are causing this, the specific code. They've dug out the URLs the data is being sent to. And what's really interesting is that I did a little digging. I went to get the IPs of these websites and found out they're aliased domains. And all of them point to another server that ends with NSATC.com. Well, NSA in there anywhere is a red warning flag that the data from your Windows 7, 8, and 10 machines isn't going to Microsoft. It's going right to the National Security Agency for whatever nefarious purposes. Now, the good news is people are already figuring out how to block this. You're able to drop the domains and the IPs right into the firewall, and as usual with all of this stuff, the criminals are going to remain invisible to the NSA, and they're going to be spying on law-abiding citizens. Complete waste of time and money. All right, got to take another break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about this sudden surge to spy on us all by the National Security Agency, and how Windows, and we should presume the Apple operating system, are loaded up with all this spyware to monitor what we're doing. And the new privacy agreement that comes with Windows 10 and will be back propagated to Windows 7 and Windows 8 says that if their computers determine that you are doing something that might be potentially illegal, and these days anything you do is illegal under this cloud of laws that have been passed, they will report you to the authorities for re-education camp or whatever else it's going to be. Now, as I mentioned before, experts are already out there determining the IPs of these data collection servers, the domain names, and the domain names can change all the time, but once you have the IP, you can block it. And yes, they can change the IPs and then send out another patch to point the spyware at the new IP, but they're fighting a losing battle. And already we're seeing these people come out and say, look, if you're doing nothing wrong, why do you care about us watching? Well, because we're private people. The Fourth Amendment to the Bill of Rights says the government has no business looking into our private lives unless they know a crime is being committed. And isn't it weird how they're looking at all of us so hard and yet they can't find the criminals? That's the biggest fallacy of this whole NSA spying on us all. They're using our own computers against us, and we're not being compensated for it. You ever stop to realize that in addition to being a violation of the Fourth Amendment and the Ninth and Tenth Amendments, all this NSA spying is a violation of the Fifth Amendment, not the part about self-incrimination. Read past that down at the bottom. The government is not supposed to use your personal property without paying you for it. And they're using our bandwidth. I mean, Microsoft spyware is loading so much added packets onto the net, it's starting to jam up. In fact, a lot of people have been wondering how the net seems to be slowing down these last few days from all this junk that Microsoft is sending all around. And if it's going to these NSA servers, then this is government use of our property without just compensation. They're using our compute cycles, our storage, our displays, and they are defrauding 300 million Americans by using their computers without just compensation. This is unconstitutional and illegal from top to bottom. And they can't find any real cyber criminals. We're supposed to just take their word that somehow all of this is protecting us against the evil ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who we now know actually work for the U.S. government. The NSA is as much out of control as the CIA is now. They have become a threat to the American people and our cybersecurity. Now remember, there's this hacking group. It's a known, acknowledged, self-acknowledged hacking group, the so-called Equation Group. They have been running for almost over a decade now. They are responsible for over 500 malware infections in 42 countries. They are considered the absolute worst hacking group of all time. But according to Kaspersky, which makes very good antivirus software, the Equation Group is actually the National Security Agency. That's why they can't catch the cyber criminals. They are the cyber criminals. They're a cyber criminal agency for a criminal government. Now, the Associated Press has filed a lawsuit against the FBI because the FBI created a fake AP website with an AP article, and they sent out an email with a link. See this story at the Associated Press. And the bogus AP website was loaded with a surveillance virus that would infect the computer of anybody who clicked on the link, enabling the FBI to spy on them. And AP is suing because AP's reputation was harmed by this. Yeah, disinformation linked with spyware. Yes, the U.S. government is doing that. The biggest cyber criminal in the world is the government of the United States of America. The biggest drug smuggler in the world is the government of the United States of America. Now, over at Microsoft Network, they got hit by a malvertising campaign. Online advertising has become a target-rich environment for the criminals. And we're not talking about some kid in a parent's basement writing JavaScript just to annoy people. We're talking about organized crime that will set up company fronts claiming to sell a product. Then they'll go to, like MSN and say, we are a company selling this and we want to buy advertising on your website. And then the advertising plants the exploit. In this case, the Angler exploit. And apparently, over at Malwarebytes, they're saying, if you're on MSN, we're talking hundreds of millions of visitors going through that site every single month. And the NSA can't find them either. Or the NSA are those people. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has put out an alert that hackers have created a fake EFF website designed to trick people to thinking they're going to the Electronic Frontier Foundation's actual website, but it's another malware plant. And again, where's the NSA in all of this? The NSA's out there claiming that they're totally monitoring the Internet, but they never catch any computer criminals. There are only two possible conclusions. Either the NSA is a total fake and a fraud, trying to scare us all into silence, the way the Gestapo tried to scare the German people into silence by pretending to be everywhere and hearing everything, or as Kaspersky Labs says, the NSA itself is behind all of these cyber crimes. None of this, of course, is with the consent of the governed. But the reality is that, once again, whatever they're doing with all of this spying, with Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 8, they're not going to catch real criminals and terrorists who already know they have to guard and protect their communications. What are they looking for? Where the wealth is for mass confiscation? Who's got silver? Who's got gold? Who's got a gun? We already know they constantly scan Facebook looking for idiots who put up selfies of things they probably ought not to have, at least in the eyes of the government. More and more people are going to Linux. I have to tell you, I question Microsoft's claim that Windows 10 is on 75 million computers, even though they were giving it away for free. Because Microsoft just announced they're having to let 8,000 people go. And we know that inflating success stories has become common practice in America. If Windows 10 was that much of an overwhelming success, why did they have to go to the effort to backpropagate to Windows 7 and Windows 8? I would question that 75 million number on that basis alone. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break here. We've got a few more things to talk about. Need some phone calls coming in the third hour. And we're going to be talking about ClimateGate. More coming in from that. The wonderful world of psychiatry. Various other scandals going on. So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back. I got a few more minutes to talk, so I'm going to keep on talking about it. Again, just a heads up, we've got Hurricane Ignacio coming in first part of next week, primarily Wednesday, so there may be a best of on that day, and I hope you'll understand. Now, we're on top of a hill here. We'll get a lot of wind. We won't get flooded out, and we'll all just hunker down here and take lots of pictures and everything. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to step back here. I forgot to make a comment. We're talking about all this out-of-control epidemic of trying to get malware on everybody's computers. And it obviously has escalated recently. It is something that is clearly being allowed to happen, if not caused outright by the United States government. And it is a cause for concern. And the reason for that concern goes back to 9/11. Where in the weeks before 9/11 happened, the FBI went all across the United States of America, shutting down the websites of Muslim charities on a wide variety of totally fabricated pretexts. So that when 9/11 happened and the corporate media said, Muslim, 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 there were no voices out there to say, wait a minute, we don't know that. You know, let's be careful that we're not being led to a conclusion, which is exactly what the government and the corporate media wanted to do. Now, we know how hard the U.S. is trying to start an all-out for real bloody war with Russia and or China so that they conduct the responsibility for crashing the global economy with this Ponzi scheme private central bank model. And we know that the only way they're going to get that is with some kind of a false flag. And their problem of controlling public perception is greatly magnified because they're not dealing with just a handful of Muslim charities with blogs. They're talking with thousands upon thousands of ordinary citizens around the world who, in the age of the Internet, are able to get their questions, concerns, and facts out there to a huge audience. And as a matter of fact, there's a story over on governmentslaves.info saying that online sources have overtaken the corporate TV news as America's most popular source of information. All these talking heads being paid millions and millions of dollars to lie to you, they've got the lesser audience. Everybody's over here. We're now the high ground in the war for the minds of America, and the government knows that. And if they're going to try some kind of a false flag, oh, Iran just dropped a nuclear bomb on Poughkeepsie, they're going to have to silence those of us who are going to stand up and say, I don't believe a word you are saying. And that may be the reason for this rush to try and just load malware into everybody's computer. So that all the computers and all the internet and everything just goes away and gets out of our way trying to start a world war. And people are taking steps to protect their data, protect their privacy, which they have a right to under the Constitution. Everything the government is doing right now is illegal and unconstitutional. Because remember, under the U.S. Supreme Court, Marbury versus Madison, laws that are repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. The government can't come out and say, we've just passed a law saying we can peek into your house whenever we want. And that's now the law. No, it isn't. Because it's repugnant to that Fourth Amendment. It is null and void. Anybody trying to enforce it is committing a crime under color of law. And we have a right to resist. The Supreme Court said that too. When law enforcement is acting outside the letter of the law, we have a right to resist, up to and including the use of lethal force. And that, by the way, is the reason the Founding Fathers gave us that Second Amendment, as a last resort to hold abusive, tyrannical government in check, which is why they're out there screaming, we got to take away the guns. They want to take away the guns. They want to take away the internet. They want to just turn it into another form of content delivery for a price system. Because they understand this carefully crafted illusion they presented to the American people of the last 100 years is falling apart. Every day, America is forced to confront the reality that we live in the United States of America that ignores the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, uses torture, uses lies to trick us into wars of conquest, treats us as property, presumes to tell us what we may eat, what we may not eat, what medicines we can take, what medicines we must take, what medicines we're not allowed. They do treat us like we're property, like we're livestock. And we're not. We're we the people. It says so right at the top of that Constitution. And anybody in government who doesn't want to abide by that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the only moral, ethical option they have is to resign. But money junkies and power freaks, they just want to rule. And they think the Constitution's just in their way. Remember when George Bush called it a blankety-blank piece of paper? He didn't even get that right. It's parchment. So that's why I think a lot of people are concerned. This huge surge of cybercrime. And yes, inevitably, we have to see this as something being done by the government. Because they never catch them. They never catch them. Not one. If they caught just one cyber criminal, let's pick for example, if they got one of these ransomware writers where they'll get into your system and you have to send them $300 to unlock your files, if they found just one of those and crucified them live on national TV, or maybe even recreated the execution of Damian after his unsuccessful attempt to assassinate Louis XVI, that would even be better, on live TV. And all the non-government sanctioned hacking would go away. This is all about spying on you. And again, I'm starting to think it's a giant bluff. If you look at the sheer volume of data coming out of all the computers, going into those IP addresses, they can't make heads or tails of it. They haven't been able to actually find anything useful in all the data they've collected so far. And with the new spying systems from Microsoft, they can't make... The data problem just got worse. You know, when you're trying to find a needle in a haystack, you don't pour more hay on the floor. And that's exactly what they're doing. The addition of data is linearly additive. But the correlation among all that data is an unlimited expansion. They're sucking up so much data, I don't think they can make heads or tails of it. Especially given the quality of software development we've been seeing coming out of this country, this government lately. I would expect that probably the NSA software is no better off than the software running the Obamacare website. And again, we proved on this website, it is trivial to create new systems of encryption that the NSA will not be able to break. They will not be able to break. They came out with the propaganda. We have a new quantum computer. We'll break any code ever made. Really? Show us. Prove it. Because I'm not taking your word for it. If this government told me it was going to be a sunny day, I would take a raincoat. I think this government, politicians, CEOs, spokesmen for pharmaceutical industry, they lie all the time. All the time. They don't dare tell the truth even once out of fear we might learn how to spot the difference. It's amazing. Speaking of which, we have another story that came out of RIMF.com about how the Pentagon is fabricating reports on ISIS. And they're making up all these reports about how they're getting ISIS and killing ISIS. And we know it's a complete lie and fabrication because we know the U.S. and Israel are supporting and equipping and training and funding ISIS as a proxy army force in Syria against Assad and as an excuse to reconquer Iraq from those Iraqi people who refuse to accept U.S. puppet rule with grace and dignity as they should. Looking back real quick on some of the economic news, the number of business closings in the United States has nearly tripled over what it was just a year ago. Much of it in retail. Having all the money in the pockets of the 1% is not going to support an entire economy. There aren't enough of them or enough hours in the day to buy enough TVs to keep the TV companies in business, to buy enough washing machines to keep the washing machine companies in business. You keep an economy going by making sure ordinary people have enough money to buy the products that are in the stores. The system is way out of balance right now. Boeing is laying off 8 people in Long Beach by October. GCR Thompson Industries issuing a shutdown warrant for their Fullerton operation. Lyris Technologies laying off 79 by the end of September. The list just keeps on going and going. But we're being told that because the stock market ended in the green, we should all believe the economy is in recovery. No, it isn't. And we are nowhere near the bottom of where this is going to go yet. Got to take a break for the news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who, because the TV repair people came and went earlier than expected,
yes,
decided to just have an impromptu join us for the third hour on this Kaahumanu Friday as we head into the weekend. So, Claire, what would you like to talk about?
I would like to talk about correlations in some horrendous refugee problems that the U.S. has been having at its borders and also Europe right now. And the question I have to ask is why and what is the timing? I don't know if any of you caught it last weekend on Al Jazeera America, but they ran a clip of displaced Syrian refugees with kids and toddlers trying to get through Macedonia, to get into Hungary, to get into Europe, to get some kind of refugee status. And what were the Macedonian police doing? They were attacking the men, and they were throwing flashbang grenades at women holding little babies and toddlers.
And also the people from Greece who are trying to get into Macedonia.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now is the biggest human refugee crisis since World War II, and it's caused by war. You tell them, what is the cause of all this misery?
And the cause of all this misery is, let's take Central America first, because there has been a huge influx of refugees there. The U.S. has gone in, militarily supported these tin pot dictators in Central America. They have militarized their police to the point where the people of these countries have no rights and are in fear of their lives.
Well, it's supporting their puppet rulers, and we're seeing in a lot of countries in South America a repeat of the U.S. pattern of trying to carry out a regime change to bring these countries back into the U.S. sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. And they're meeting more and more resistance, both because the people of these nations understand this is what the U.S. is doing, and the U.S. is not as attractive a business partner as it used to be, and that's why we're seeing all these countries over, such as Egypt and the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, they're starting to very quietly back away from involvement with the United States, and they're starting to make deals with Russia and China. And the U.S. hopes to reverse that trend through military means, and that basically is a red carpet to an outright global war now.
Yeah, it's really, really ugly. And the problem in both the Middle East and in Central America and in Mexico has been a failure of U.S. foreign policy for the people who live in those countries. And many of those, for example, from Syria, they have been displaced. They cannot go home again. They can't go home with their wives, with their kids.
Their homes don't exist anymore.
Yeah, they've been bombed out of existence.
And it's not a case of U.S. foreign policy failing these people. These people were never a factor in the formulation of U.S. foreign policy.
And there's the rub. Yeah, to me, there's the rub from a standpoint of moral and humanitarian
they're
policy.
Just in the way. The goal is control of the currency and control of the oil and control of the molybdenum and the control of everything else. And the people are just in the way. And world leaders who plot war, they make the conscious decision right from the beginning. Millions are going to die or be displaced, and that's exactly what's going on right now. I'm sure that future history books are going to say this was World War III already underway at this point. Yeah. They just don't want you to know about it yet.
Well, I've noticed
you might be upset
that Angela Merkel in Germany has had to make some pro-immigrant statements, and she has gotten very thoroughly booed by the German people. So apparently she is very much carrying Obama's water in terms of Middle Eastern refugees.
Well, see, here's the thing. Yeah. Once a group of people are designated refugees under agreement with the United Nations and membership, other nations are obligated to take them in more or less. In fact, last year the United Nations tried to declare the illegal immigrants coming up from Mexico as refugees in order to override efforts by the various states to try and somehow secure their borders. And what we're coming up on is a situation where the UN is going to declare everybody on the planet a refugee, which legally effectively erases the borders. Everybody's going to go wherever they think they're going to have a better life. Yeah. And again, it's just part of this plan to erase our sense of a national identity.
Yeah, I hear that and I see that. And yet at the same time, in looking at these people, and especially the children, to me there is no mom or dad or kid that I would ever consider collateral damage, ever. And to see so much displacement and so much misery with these wars is pretty horrific. I mean, I think it was the one of the people from the UN who was going in and seeing what's going on with Yemen, which is a U.S.-enabled war that the Saudis are doing against the Yemenite people.
On behalf of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing.
Again, Yemen is being collectively punished, for kicking out their U.S. puppet ruler. And collective punishment is a war crime under international treaty, under the Geneva Convention, under the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and yet the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are continuing to basically do that. If you refuse our puppet ruler, bad things will happen to you. Same message they're putting into Libya, same message they're putting into Iraq, and everybody knows that's what's going on.
Yeah,
I know you don't want to hear this, but in this world war, the United States is the bad guy.
It's like that old Pogo cartoon, we have met the enemy and he is us.
Very much so.
And, in the last election, if one can call it that, in Yemen, there was only one name on the ballot.
Gee, I wonder who's going to win.
Yeah, right. It's like the Yemenite people have never, to date, for a long time, had a real choice in who was going to lead their future.
Well, Hillary's doing that with the Democrats right now. They're trying to convince Biden to step down because he's dividing the Democratic Party, and we will lose the White House unless Biden bows out and lets Hillary be the candidate. Nope. Even though Biden is polling ahead of Hillary, Biden is polling as more likely to defeat a Republican challenger than Hillary. But that's it. Removing choice.
Yeah.
That's what dictatorship is all about.
Yeah.
They'll give you the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Go into that little booth and push the little red button. You've voted. We'll tell you tomorrow who your new rulers are, and you can't complain anymore because whatever abuse we pile onto you, hey, this is what you voted for.
No, actually what it is the senior members of Democrats and Republicans are thoroughly vetted by the major corporations, and their only question is, what are you going to give me legislatively? And so by the time that we have the vote, quote unquote, the choice has been made for us by the major corporations.
Yeah, the will of the people doesn't matter because it doesn't matter who we vote for. We get another corporate Israeli lackey. That's why Ron Paul terrified them so much in 2008 and 2012. It's why Donald Trump terrifies them so much now. Even Ben Carson. Same thing with Jeremy Corbyn over in Great Britain.
Yeah.
This is the year of the political maverick, the reactionary president. And they're very, very scared about all of this, especially Trump, because he's got so much of his own personal money he can't be bought.
Yeah, yeah. And I am sitting and I'm listening, and also Bernie Sanders has a lot positive to say.
He is polling ahead of Jeb Bush right now.
Yeah. And he could in no way be considered an insider or part of a dynastic family in any way, shape, or form.
Well, we only have the two dynastic families now, the Bushes and the Clintons, and their goal is to just hand off the White House back and forth, in perpetuity. They're already shaping up Chelsea Clinton to get into public life and have her run possibly at the end of Hillary's presumed ownership of the White House, or Jeb Bush's ownership. She'll be positioned, and then there'll be a Bush grandchild ready to take on over. But we've got to break that. The White House is not an hereditary position or title. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, what did you want to talk about next?
Well, I know that we've got a Labor Day holiday coming up where we've got friends and family and food and all that wonderful good thing. But I'd like our listeners and our viewers to be thinking a little bit about some of those in this country who don't, and through no fault of their own. If you can and you'd feel comfortable with it, I'd like everyone who's listening and watching to think about getting involved in their communities, maybe in a food distribution program, also in terms of harvesting potential food waste. There is a wonderful organization on the mainland called Second Harvest, and it keeps food from going to waste, because food waste in this country it's awful.
I tried to get the local food rescue program to come up to where we were shooting.
I remember
that movie, because the craft services. It made me sick to see all this perfectly good food just going into the trash bins. Unfortunately, it was too far away and everything. But it's painful to watch how much is going to a segment of our society and everybody else is being left behind. We have these horrible numbers coming out of California about thousands and thousands of people being made homeless every single month.
13,000.
That's in Los Angeles. Same thing up in San Francisco because rents are skyrocketing. And I'm kind of wondering, why are rents skyrocketing? If it results in more homelessness, obviously the total revenue is going to be in decline. It's almost like supply and demand doesn't exist anymore. And when you get enough homeless people in a city, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people with nothing to lose who are very angry. And it's a tinderbox awaiting a single spark. But I know there's a lot of charities out there, the big corporate charities that say, send us a check and we'll take care of children over in Africa or some other place. But the best way to do it, the way to guarantee that what you're doing actually gets to the people who need it is to get involved. And Claire and I are involved in two local programs. One is through Claire's church, where she just got named the choir director. Plug, 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 plug. And also at a local Catholic church that we donate to. And by the way, for those of you who donate to WhatReallyHappened.com, we do use part of that money to also support these food programs. And we go over and help hand it out and package it, and we get to look these people right in the eye who need this help. And it's a real Buddha on the road moment because the media likes to say, oh, those homeless and hungry people, they deserved it, they're losers, they're druggies. No, they're not.
No.
It's like looking in a mirror, and we can see young couples with families who were perfectly okay, and then all of a sudden their job vanishes. Hawaii can be a real trap. A lot of our homeless problem comes from other communities on the mainland just getting one-way tickets to their homeless and sending them here, and that's been a big problem. But the other one is couples will come out here. They're promised a job in our local tourism industry. They spend the money to come on out here, and then because our tourism is in decline, thanks to the TSA, their job evaporates or vanishes through no fault of their own, and they don't have enough money to get back to the mainland, and it can become a real trap. Same problem up in Alaska. There's a joke running around. What's an Alaskan sourdough? Well, it's somebody who's now sour on Alaska, but they don't have the dough to leave. And we get a lot of that here. Mm-hmm. Very often, we will see out on the street these huge piles representing an entire household. All the appliances, all the furniture, all the clothing, everything from people who just took what little money they had left for airfare back to the mainland, and they had to leave everything else in their life behind. And it's just a little tragedy, and it's just all over the place. So you really need to get involved, and you need to look these people in the face, because you're looking at the true cost of all this Wall Street money junkie behavior and Washington, D.C. complicity. And economic fascism, because these people are the ones who are forced to pay the price. All these riches that are showering over Wall Street, they don't appear out of thin air, even with the printing presses and the computers at the Federal Reserve, because ordinary people pay the price through increased inflation. People who were in the stock market get destroyed because the government is manipulating the market. Every time they do another upshove on the stock market, they're destroying people who are short selling. Somebody always has to be made to pay for all the wealth of the 1%. Yeah. And if you get involved in a food program, you're going to look at the real victims of the 1% right in the face, and you're going to realize what thin a line separates you from being them.
I mean, no one wakes up in the morning and says, gee, I think I'd love to be homeless with my family in a car somewhere. Nobody wakes up and says that.
Some of them don't even have cars to live in.
I know.
You know.
I know.
So it's a horrible, horrible situation. And the corporate media, of course, doesn't even want to look at that. They want to convince you that the homeless and hungry deserve it, that you should have no sympathy for them, because, hey, if you're giving your money away to the hungry and homeless, then you're not down there at the shopping mall buying the things we want to sell you for the Christmas shopping season, which is now officially open in some department store chains, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
But ordinary America is running out of money. The whole point of the Federal Reserve private central banking system is to take all the real wealth of the nation, put it in the pockets of the bankers. Nobody had a plan for what to do when they succeeded. And the economy is locking up because there simply isn't enough currency in circulation to power the economy. And they could fix the problem overnight. But these people are so addicted to wealth, they can't bring themselves to do it. Like any other addict, they're seeing their community, their homes, their neighborhood, the nation destroyed by their addiction, but they cannot stop.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly out there. And especially when you think of the rise in numbers of homeless and poor children under this last administration.
40% of children
40%.
are living under the poverty line in the United States of America, and they still want to try and pretend they're the greatest nation on earth and that there's an economic recovery. The numbers are actually worse right now than they were in the Depression of the 1930s, which was being called the Great Depression. I guess they're going to call this one the Grand Depression. It sounds more positive. It's the Grand. It must be better than the last one. Because,
no.
Okay.
No. Yeah, the numbers are pretty awful, and the numbers of food insecure people is moving forward in an exponential way.
Actually, right now, the majority of Americans, and that includes people who are listening to this show right now, at some point every year, you will miss a meal because you're not able to afford food, or the supply chain has broken down, which is getting to be more and more of a problem, especially here in Hawaii. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come back, some newly developing stories we're going to be sharing with you. Global warming, they're back there trying to sell that one again, along with vaccines and GMO. We're going to get caught up on all that stuff. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're coming on to the end of the show on our Kaahumanu Friday and the start of my official birthday, whatever it is I'm going to be doing. Probably get drunk and cry a lot.
Stop it. Not on my watch, dear.
Anyway, I just saw a story. I have to go back to this. This is so funny. Okay, and it tells you basically the true nature of politicians. As you know, earlier in the week it came out that Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, had signed up for one of the accounts at the Ashley Madison website, in which, in theory, he was looking for a woman to have an extramarital affair with. And first of all, he got suckered because we know the website was a complete fraud. Most of the female profiles were fake. It was just a hoax. It made the guy a huge amount of money. He's now stepped down. So Biden's son was a moron for signing up in the first place, especially being related to the vice president and a public figure.
Yeah.
The risk he was taking that it might get exposed. Well,
ouch.
Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, has a new excuse. Russian hackers planted his name on the Ashley Madison website in order to harm Joe Biden. And I would say more likely Hillary hackers.
Yeah.
You know, because Hillary wants Biden gone. Russia could care less, okay, to be honest about that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, as was the case with the credit card information, the IP mapping is showing that, yeah, it was really Joe Biden's kid who was doing this. And again, it's no big deal. Look at how many people did sign up. And that was quite pricey and everything. And they were all made fools of. And again, for you women who have discovered that your husband's address appeared in the dump databases, they didn't really have an affair. They were just daydreaming about it. Okay? I have to be very honest. I would not be surprised if it turns out there never were any actual affairs because all the women on that website were made up out of thin air.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, and I got to tell you, the few real women who signed up, I have a feeling nobody was going to plan on having affairs with them anyway, you know, because it's a seller's market, so to speak.
Yes.
All righty, another story that we need to talk about, this is a little more serious. It has now come out that Netanyahu seriously entertained the possibility of carrying off unprovoked attacks against Iran to destroy their nuclear power plant, the same way that Israel destroyed Iraq's nuclear power plant. Same excuse. They're building bombs in the basement. And as you know, following the 2003 invasion and conquest of Iraq, international experts examined the ruins of the power station at Osirak, and all they found was a power station. Israel's response was, "Oh, gee, our bad. We're so embarrassed. We thought there was a bomb factory in the basement, just like the one we have in Dimona." And but apparently, the Israeli generals, the top commanders in the military, basically said, no, we can't do this. It's one thing for Israel with all their U.S. taxpayer-provided weapons to go in and slap around the Syrians or the Lebanese or the Palestinians, but actually to go to war with somebody who might be able to fight back, we're not really ready to do that. And so even within Israel, there's a huge, huge opposition to Netanyahu's warmongering. And he's still out there trying to prove that he is in charge of the U.S. Congress. And hoisting with your own petard, if he succeeds, every American's going to see that. Go ahead.
Mike, there were ads very prominently placed against people in Congress who feel that they're going to go for the nuclear deal. And, you know, you've got to call his office, tell him he can't do that.
Oh, they're spending huge amounts of money.
Millions.
And it's your money.
Yeah.
You know, the U.S. government gives the money to Israel in violation of the Leahy Act, the Glenn Act, the Symington Amendment. Mm-hmm. Israel then sends it back to AIPAC that mounts these huge ad campaigns and media buys. I mean, they've been all over Fox News. You know, the Iran deal guarantees Iran will get a nuclear weapon. And this is coming from the same people who've been screaming that Iran is within 6 weeks of a nuclear weapon since the 1980s. And it's huge. And again, it could be a Pyrrhic victory. If Netanyahu succeeds in getting the Congress to obey him and destroy America's participation in the deal, all America is going to see it. And they're going to be going into the 2016 election season knowing all these members of Congress don't work for the American people, don't work for the president, don't work for the United States of America. They serve a foreign power. And that is something we're going to be reminding everybody of every week from now until the next election. And so Netanyahu is listening to his ego. He wants to prove he's still in control of his, client state, the U.S. government, and he could destroy it himself and Israel's influence in this country by doing so. But he's definitely listening to his own ego now.
Yes, it's a little terrifying, and I have to wonder if, in fact, the Iran deal does pass, will Netanyahu be looking at 2016 and seeing if he can find people in Congress, the presidency, and the military who may rescind the deal? Would that be his next scenario, other than just blowing things up in Iran?
I think probably because Netanyahu is looking at his own political support crumbling. Mm-hmm. I think if he's not able to kill the deal in the U.S., that they will go off and just attack Iran and then step back and say, you Americans come and protect us from the Iranians. They're attacking and invading us. Yeah, but you bombed them first. That doesn't matter. They're attacking us. You have to throw your children in there to stop all the bullets. That would be his next move, unless he's stopped within his own government. And we're starting to see more and more opposition to that situation. But again, even if Netanyahu succeeds in getting the U.S. Congress to kill the Iran deal for the United States, that doesn't affect all the other participants.
Yeah.
The rest of the P5+1, they're already there in Tehran. Britain just reopened the embassy. They're all there signing contracts. And American businesses that could profit from the resumption of relations with Iran, they're having to sit on their hands and wait for Congress and Israel to duke it out over who's in charge of the U.S. government. By the time they get to Iran, even if the deal goes forward, there's going to be nothing left.
Yeah.
The Iranians are going to be saying, you should have been here 2 months ago. We had oil contracts and we had, manufactured goods we wanted to buy and heavy equipment we wanted to buy. And, we had plenty of contracts for you, but you weren't there, so we had to sign with all these other countries. So Netanyahu, even whether he succeeds or fails, has still caused tremendous economic harm to the United States of America.
Yes, because that whole thing is timing. And if you can't get in at the right moment in the cycle, it's sort of like riding a wave. If you cannot get in at that right moment, you're kind of doomed. You
really are.
Yeah.
All right, couple of quick stories about drones. North Dakota, as you know, has now passed into law a bill that allows the police to use armed drones over the crowd, flying overhead. Now, it's supposedly non-lethal. But we know those tasers can kill people.
Yeah.
Rubber bullets, tear gas, all of that stuff that can be deployed remotely with the press of a button. Now, there has been a tendency to use these remote-control taser belts on prisoners in prison, and there's already a scandal that the guards just like to push the button for fun, just to see somebody fall over and flop on the ground. What are these operators of these drones over our head? Are they going to be any more responsible or discriminating than the people driving those drones over in the Middle East? No, they aren't.
And, Mike, there's an issue here that we need to talk about. Obama has believed, quote unquote, that he has the right to kill anyone with an extrajudicial assassination overseas. How far a leap is it in his thinking to believe that he can do anything to people in the U.S. without due process?
I haven't heard him use the word overseas. He just says he's got the right to kill any American who is aiding the enemy, which is rather loosely defined. We've got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment on this Kaahumanu Friday, heading into a fun weekend, and next weekend, of course, is the Labor Day vacation. So I'm looking at Fox News here, and they can't make fun of Donald Trump anymore because he proved it's not actually a toupee. It's his real hair. Could still be fake, but got the girl. So now they've got a new slang name for him. It's Candidate Casino. They're going to remind everybody he's tied in with gambling. Well, every GOP candidate is. They're all getting cash from Sheldon Adelson.
Yep.
Out there in Las Vegas, he made his billions running casinos, making money off the gambling addicts. So they're desperate. Now then, real quick comment about the drones you were talking about. North Dakota is now allowing armed police drones over your head to make sure you slaves stay in your place, or we will tase you. And apparently, even while there are growing calls for individual citizens to not be allowed to have drones anymore, because we might be able to use them to see somebody coming to get us. Companies are now starting to acquire drones to monitor their employees. When you're working, the drone is flying over your head. Have they all forgotten the disaster when all the efficiency experts were over-managing the people in the post office and they started flipping out and shooting people?
And going postal.
Yeah, that's where this slang, going postal. And,
yeah.
There's only so much you can micromanage a person, before they're going to freak out and say it isn't worth the minimum wage. They'll start swatting the drones out of the sky and killing their mid-managers. Now, Chrome has just announced, the Chrome browser, starting September 1st, they will now block all Flash advertising from playing in their browser. I think it's way overdue. Amazon is refusing Flash ads. I don't know why Flash is still being used by so many people. It was a wonderful invention in the days of acoustically coupled modems, where Flash's original design was to be able to have complex animated graphics in a very limited bandwidth context. But we're all now gigabit streams here, and we don't need it, and it is such a security hole. We will not allow Flash advertising internally at WhatReallyHappened.com. Unfortunately, some of our advertisers from their websites, they're using Flash. But it is a wide-open major security problem, and I am glad that so many companies are finally starting to get on board and say, we have to shut this down. It's just terrible. Now, over in New York, apparently New York is fining retailers $300,000 under their new gun laws for selling toy guns to New York residents that look too much like the banned assault weapons. I mean, that's how crazy wacko the gun grabbers are getting here. And on the territory of liberal, let's ban everything, we're now getting the new list of words that really we shouldn't be saying because of bad associations, which includes the word American. I'm going to pull your microphone down here while you deal with... Okay, well,
we're good.
You're still very loud when you do that. And
sorry.
My ears are still ringing.
I'm sorry.
Welcome to the world of professional radio. So we heard this actually from this university saying that American is now banned because it excludes the people of South America and Central America who should be part of that, and the word American implies United States of America. Yeah, it does. It really does. And the political correct movement, which is the new version of George Orwell's Newspeak, is coming out with a list of words to be banned, including obese, normal, mothering, fathering, mother, father, boy, girl, senior citizens, homosexuals, and illegal aliens. We will come up with Newspeak words for all of those. Undocumented workers, parent 1, parent 2, parenting, and so forth. That's what they're doing. And George Orwell explained what this is all about. If you take away the words that mean certain thoughts the government doesn't want you to think, then you stop thinking them. That's it. Controlling the brain by controlling the language. And they're really doing it. They're trying to do it. Real quick, because we're almost running out of time. The University of Colorado put out their own study on sea level rise, saying that sea level is just rising and it's out of control. And it turns out their estimates of sea level rise are 5 times what the NOAA tide gauges are actually showing, which is that sea level will rise, at least at the gauges, 2 inches by the year 2100. Ooh, we should all be afraid. What's even more interesting is this story that came out of the Los Angeles Times, where they're talking about how sea levels are rising. It's human-caused global warming. It's not going to stop. And it starts out saying for the last 23 years, ocean levels around the world have climbed 3 inches. It's horrible, and NASA is saying it's going to be terrible. And then they go on to admit sea levels measured in California, and in fact the entire western U.S. coast, they've actually declined. But take our word for it, they will rise eventually and drown you if you don't pay your carbon tax and bow down and worship St. Al of the Gore. What's going on is that ice formation is increasing at the pole caps. They don't want you to know that, but that's what's going on. And yes, the sea levels are in decline. We're going into another brutal winter. We're already seeing snow in the Rockies, frost warnings in the Great Plains. This is still August.
Yeah.
The Old Farmer's Almanac is saying it's going to be a horrible winter. We had a blizzard in July on the Big Island. I mean, come on, people, wake up and smell the frostbite. Now, there's another story that came out of Stephen Goddard. Every time there's a hot day anywhere in the country, it'll get banner headline attention. A record-setting hot day over here. And yes, we are still getting record-setting hot days. We're not getting anywhere near as many. Prior to 1960, 100-degree days were very common in, for example, Illinois. They had far fewer of them this year. Same thing's going on down in Australia. Yes, they still occasionally get hot days. Nowhere near as many. And finally, getting on back to this issue of out-of-control psychiatric pseudoscience, the pushing of pills, and completely missing, the nut job who shot those reporters yesterday, and then supposedly himself. Scientists recently tried to replicate psychology experiments on which much of the current so-called science of psychiatry is based. Only a third of them could be replicated. The other 2/3 failed miserably. Now, the essence of scientific method is reproducibility of results. If you can't conduct the same experiment and get the same result, then the theory is flawed. And here we have 2/3 of the experiments we're told justify modern psychiatry cannot be duplicated.
That means that there's absolutely no solid information at all that we have.
You need to remember psychiatry is not really a science. There's no machine that you can tape to somebody's forehead with a needle that says sociopath, manic depressive, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, especially because that last one is just a made-up disease. It's always some priest of the religion of psychiatry saying, I think you are suffering from orthorexia nervosa. You are obsessed with eating healthy foods and avoiding GMOs and chemicals. Therefore, you are mentally ill, and here is a pill that you must buy and take. Psychiatry really is much closer to a religion than it is to any kind of a science. There's no scientific basis for it. And this recent result, where they went back and re-examined 100 of these so-called classic psychiatric experiments, and they could only reproduce 1/3 of them. And the whole purpose of going back and doing that was they were trying to reassure everybody that the science of psychiatry is sound and reliable and trustworthy, and they pretty much proved the exact opposite. Now, one more story before we get to the end of the show, and I've been racing to get into this one. There is a major epidemic of sexual abuse of children by teachers over in Clark County School District, Nevada. Over the last 10 years, more than 30 of these employees have been arrested for alleged sexual misconduct against students. Now, my question is, what medications were these people on? Because when you are talking about the ill effects of prescription psychiatric drugs, in particular SSRIs, the side effects are not exclusively confined to acts of mass violence and suicide. They'll get the headlines. But what else is going on? We're seeing this sudden surge in child molestation. I want to find out if these molesters are taking these pills. We may have seriously screwed up the national mind in the quest for pharmaceutical profits. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and start the birthday party. And we'll be back on Monday here on the Genesis Communication Network. Thanks to everybody who's already sent in birthday wishes. I'll be replying to all of you over the weekend. Talk to you Monday. Aloha, America.